Hi, my name is Minda Harts, and I'm the host of Secure the Seat Live. I hope you are doing well. Thank you for joining us and having lunch with us today on this Monday. I hope you had a good weekend, and so we're just chiming in and about to have a really great conversation. I'm so excited to have my friend here, Dr. Nika White. We're going to talk about a lot of things, but she is an author, she is a consultant, she is a public speaker, she is all the things. Dr. White, welcome to Secure the Seat.
Thank you so much, Minda. It is such an honor to be here with you. So thanks for thinking of me for this opportunity.
Oh, a pleasure. You helped me secure my seat too, and so I'm glad we can have this conversation together. Why don't you tell our audience a little bit more about you?
Oh, sure. So, as you mentioned, I am actually the owner of a consulting firm that actually focuses on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, we intersect DEI with leadership and business. We work with all types of clients, private, public sector, different industries, different sizes, primarily helping them to integrate into their business framework, strategic diversity, intentional inclusion, and of course, a lens of equity. And so, super passionate about this space.
Yes. And, oops. Today we're going to talk about. Do you hear that feedback?
No.
Okay. So listen, I'm so excited that you all are here with us today. I know people are watching us on LinkedIn, they're watching us on YouTube. If you have questions, please make sure that you pop them in the chat so that we can get to as many as possible. We're talking about what it's like to be a consultant, and I figured, you know what? So many people say that word and they're like, I want to be a consultant, but they often don't know what that means, Dr. White, or what goes into that. And so can you tell us about your career journey to becoming a DEI consultant?
Sure. So quite honestly, Minda, I did not set out to be an entrepreneur and do this work of consulting. I was on a career trajectory where I felt as though I was going to be in corporate America for the long haul. My background is actually marketing communications, and I was working for a large full service ad agency, and they're headquartered in Greenville, South Carolina, but they also have a presence in New York. And I was in between both offices. And I was always very envious when I would go to the New York office because it had greater level of diversity. And I really felt as though I wanted to bring some of that diversity to Greenville, South Carolina, which was the agency that I was based at. But I remember sitting in my office one day and I had this epiphany. I started thinking about how much I love the industry of marketing communications, how it was always on strategy, on budget, and it was very fast paced, very dynamic. But then I started thinking, I love this career path. Why aren't there others who look like me that's also taking advantage of this career path? And so, unbeknown to me, that was really the start of being drawn to this work of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I started thinking about the BHAG for the agency at the time, the big, hairy, audacious goal, and it was to become the most admired agency in the Southeast. And so I thought, if that's our goal, then we need to be very proactive about this work of inclusion and diversifying the workforce. Because when you think about marketing communications firms, their charge is to be smart marketing partners to their clients, whose consumer constituencies represent diverse America, right? So I couldn't let that thought go, and I ended up going to the president CEO at the time, who was very hands-on with the agency, and we had a conversation. And he asked some very thought-provoking questions. I shared what I thought was the business case for us to delve into this work, and at the end of the conversation, he said, "Nika, I agree. We need to do it. You're going to lead it. Now tell me how." And I was prepared in that conversation for everything except for the tell me how. But I knew that I had the wherewithal to put really smart people into my camp that would allow me to become really smart, really fast about this work that, again, I was incredibly drawn to. And fast forward years later, I began doing this work for the agency, and then I ended up transitioning to another organization as their newly created VP of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and it led to opportunities from there. So I did have an exit strategy. I will say that about being a consultant. It's really important to have an exit strategy. So for me, during the time when I was really immersing myself into this space of diversity, equity, and inclusion, I wrote 2 books. I started producing a lot of other content to really help establish myself as a thought leader. I became certified as a certified diversity executive, got my doctorate. I was building my network, building my brand. And so I share all of this because having a plan and an exit strategy is really critical. And that's what I think allowed me to, out of the gate, realize success pretty quickly in terms of building up my clientele. So That's my story.
I love that. You know that I'm all about having a strategy, and you had one, and you were busy, sis. You were busy getting a doctorate. You're busy writing books.
I was busy. Yes.
Making it happen. And so you were feeding into your thought leadership before maybe you were a thought leader. Would you say that's true, perhaps?
No, that's very true. I mean, Minta, I was so intentional. It's one of my favorite words, by the way. And my first book is entitled The Intentional Inclusionist, but I believe in the power of being intentional. And I was, as I was building relationships and working directly as a W-2 employee in the business, I was thinking ahead of, okay, so at some point in time, if I'm building this relationship now, I am going to want to be able to have them as a potential client. And so it was very deliberate, everything that I did, because I had that exit strategy. I knew where I wanted to land long term, and I think that allowed me to be better prepared for what I needed to do while I was working towards that goal, that end goal.
I love that. I love that so much. The other question I wanted to ask you, since you've been in this industry for a little while, what are 2 best practices you think every consultant should know?
Oh, that's a great question, Minda. The first thing I think that consultants should really spend some time being intentional about is understanding why are they in the business as a consultant. And so I think that sometimes because we are good at our craft and at our subject matter, we decide now we can make money off of it, and that's important, but it is a business, so if you treat it as a business, you're going to need to make sure that it's not just about executing to your craft and your trade and your knowledge base, but equally important, how do you build this business? How do you build up your business acumen to be able to grow the business to the next level? How do you make sure that your pricing model is competitive, yet still allows you to have growth opportunities in terms of elevating your business to the next level? And then even thinking about what type of clientele do you want to serve? I'll tell you that when I first started, I was, unfortunately not as keenly aware of the clientele that I wanted. And I was going after, anyone that was willing to pay me money to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what I found later on in my consultancy is that didn't serve me well. And so I had to be very specific with who are the clients that I mostly could really help them to reach success. And success looks different from client to client. And so one thing is to know your clients, know who you want to go after. And sometimes it's a matter of just taking a step back and asking yourself questions like, what problems do I enjoy solving? What industries speak to me and my interest and my skill sets and knowledge base? Even what personal connections do I have, with different types of clients and their problems? And so that's one thing. The next thing that I would say by way of advice for consultants is to even think intently about why you're taking on a certain client. So, and I wrote a blog recently, and literally, one of the topics of it was, am I taking on this client because we are aligned or because I'm desperate for the money, right? Those are real conversations we have to have with ourselves. And if you're unsure whether or not you're taking on a client, then, again, ask questions like, do I believe that I can help? Do I have something to offer that's going to help that organization go to the next level? And if you feel as though there's not an alignment, then don't be afraid to recalibrate and to make sure that going forward, you are much more in alignment with those clients that you feel like you have the best propensity to help succeed.
There were so many gems of best practices in your response. And, 2 things that I'm hearing you say is, yes, we want to secure the seat, but not every seat is the right seat, right?
Right, absolutely. Absolutely. Not every seat is the right seat. And not every seat necessarily is the right seat for each of us. I mean, the bottom line is that sometimes people will perceive that one consultant is the same as another consultant, but no, there's a lot of specialties about consultants, even if you are in the same space and industry. And so make sure you're doing your homework to find out what are their service and service offerings that are a best alignment with what your needs are. And to trust them to really be that consultant partner, which means you don't hire someone to tell them what to do. They need to be telling you what to do to how to solve your problem. And so really trusting them with their ability and skill sets to help lead you and navigate you.
Yeah, I love that. To share with us your recent blog post about that, because I think sometimes, I know for me, when I started, public speaking and doing some consulting, I'm like, oh, this company wants me to do it. Yes. And then I'd get into it and I'd be like, maybe I wasn't the right person to do it. A, maybe I'm not the right person. B, I really don't want to be consulting on this. Right. But
Yes.
you have, you're like, well, I need the money or whatever the case, all of these things. But it's definitely a journey that I've had to flesh out. Let's take a couple audience questions. It's blowing up on both of them, but I'm seeing a couple questions that I'm seeing. We'll start with one of them. Dr. White, how did you build a strategy to become a thought leader?
That's a great question. And so I think that you have to first take a step back and think about, what does it mean to be a thought leader? It doesn't necessarily mean that you are an expert, know it all, be it all, but it means that you are very clear about your why and your vision and the space in which you want to be known for, and that you begin to operate accordingly. And so I like to consider myself a Jane, not a Jack, but a Jane of all trades, if you will. I can do a lot of things well, but that doesn't mean that I necessarily need to go out and be doing all of those things. I mentioned before that my background is marketing communications. And so when I was starting out, I had a number of people that would reach out to say, can you provide business coaching for me? Can you provide marketing coaching for me or services? And while I certainly could have said yes, I knew that it wasn't part of my why and what I really wanted to do. And so a strategy is about calling out, being very deliberate to call out. What is it that you want to do? What does that look like? I even wrote like a personal mission statement for myself and for my business. And then that allowed me to stay focused on what my end goals were. So I think that if you were to consider a strategic plan for any type of organization, we also need a personal strategic plan for ourselves. That was the start of my strategy, was to think about what I really wanted and how I felt that I could best show up in doing that and providing those services. And then aligning it with what are those other actionable items that was going to help me to get there. And so that included writing a lot of content. It included saying yes to opportunities early on so I could share my thought and my voice. It included immersing myself into all of the resources that were available to really become an astute practitioner with knowledge of different perspectives around how to facilitate this work of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that's what worked for me. Hopefully there's something within that helps the audience member to apply it to their situation.
Yes, absolutely. I don't know about them, but I'm definitely getting full at lunch by the gems that you're dropping on us. And the other question that I have here in the chat is, how do you go about setting your fee structure? Now, I know that's probably a large question, but maybe you can give a couple tips on that.
Yeah, I can. And I will tell you this: my fee structure has evolved over time. I think that's probably consistent for most consultants. But when I was starting out, I just did a lot of research. I was really adamant about putting people in my camp, my tribe, if you will, that were well accomplished at being a consultant in this space. And so fortunately for me, they were generous with sharing. And so I could use that as a baseline. But then also, I will tell you that I've grown in that I do not have hourly fees. That's just my philosophy about it. And the reason why is because I charge based upon a solution, not actually how much time, because, I realize that the skill sets that I've gained to be able to do this work as an astute practitioner, it's not just about how much time it takes me, but it's also about the time that I can avoid my clients having to extend and invest, because I'm bringing this wealth of knowledge and this experience. And so I think it's about doing your homework, understanding what market rates are, and then don't be afraid of being a little bit higher if you feel like that is the worth of your product and your value. I tell clients a lot. I have like this page in my media kit, and I says, it's titled "A Word on Value." And I begin to say, can you find someone else that can do the same work that you're asking me to do for you less? Yes, you can. But here's my commitment to you, and this is why I stand behind my fee. That's all about securing the seat too. Minda, a lot of that I learned from you. And so, but yeah, don't be afraid to ask for what you feel like you are worth, and to stand behind that. I am fortunate to where I am at a place in my business where I can be quite selective about what I say yes and no to. So there are times to where I may lower my fee just because I have passion around this new project or this new assignment that I feel like is going to open me up to being able to offer it as a pretty consistent service, within my roster of of service offerings. And so there's some variables, but just be clear about your value and what you bring, and then do your homework.
I love that. That's such great advice. And, for me, when I consult with companies or organizations, I too have a similar model in which I don't charge by the hour. I charge by the delivery, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
because I can't say that it's going to take me 10 hours or 20 hours, but and it's going to take a little, time to figure out what your needs are, how we work in tandem together, right? All of those things. And so
Yeah.
I love that you shared that. I don't think we talk about that out loud enough, kind of those fees.
Right. No, I'm with you. And Minda, something else that I will add as well, and I had to learn this. Again, I said that my pricing structure has evolved, but we have to realize that not every client is the same. And so sometimes if I'm getting to know the client, I understand the complexity of how many layers. Some clients that I have are global and they have multiple locations. And so if I'm doing an assessment for them, the cost for that is not going to be the same as maybe a relatively small, nonprofit that has 40 to 50 employees, with one location. So I think that we have to give ourselves the ability to really identify what is going to be required to deliver the scope of work based upon the structure and the complexity of the client.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to dig back into that. But if you all watching us, make sure that you get your questions in the chat, and we'll have time to get a couple more in. But my last question before we jump into the bonus round is, what are a couple of things organizations and companies should consider when they hire an outside consultant?
I love this question as well. And once again, it's so interesting, Minda, about the questions that you're asking me today. There are blogs out there that I probably recently wrote on them, and this is one as well. This blog was entitled 5 Things That DEI Practitioners Need You to Know. So I'm going to talk about it from just a broad consultancy perspective, but I came at it from the angle on the blog from a DEI perspective. But the first thing is, stop overcomplicating the RFP process. I find that has been a really big, deterrent for a lot of consultant partners to want to engage. And again, I'm not at all against having a process in which you're vetting and making sure that your needs are aligning with the right consultant partner. But I'm also finding that it is becoming very inundating. Some people have an RFP process that is just multi-layered, and I'm thinking of one in particular that I just went through, and I finally had to say, you know what, I can't give any more time to this. This is really now going beyond the scope of work that we feel comfortable extending, especially if you're starting to ask for methodology and the approach. They're already developing the strategy for you, and there's a cost associated with that. So the one thing is to be thoughtful about the RFP process. It's certainly good to vet, but make sure that you aren't overcomplicating it. And the bottom line is that a lot of suppliers who are doing the work, consultancy work, that should be in the consideration set and probably should be hired, that means that there's value to their services. So they're inundated already. So if you add that on, you're just going to probably narrow the pool of consultant partners that potentially you'll be able to engage with. The other thing is, assess your level of readiness before reaching out. I think that there's value in doing at least a little bit of homework on the client's end to really be able to clearly articulate what it is that you feel like you want. It doesn't have to be the path to get there, but at least what is the end goal, end result? Because otherwise, sometimes there's multiple ways to be successful, and they're grappling with, well, what's going to be the best approach for you? And I think that sometimes if clients aren't able to fully articulate what their end goal is, then it's going to be hard for consultant partners to really align. So spend some time thinking on the front end and assessing what is our readiness as an organization, as the leaders within our organization, for the work that we're setting out to accomplish. And do we feel like we're already fully vested in what that process is going to entail? And I know you said 2, but I'm going to mention one more. Pay your consultants. Be willing to pay your consultants. Consultants are not all one and the same. Some people will think that if I hire DEI consultant, then all DEI consultants are the same. I can tell you that it's not true at all. We all have different specialties. We all have different expertise. All have different clients and industries in which we work in, and different approaches and methodology. And so don't just assume that one consultant in one particular industry or space is going to be the same across the board.
Yeah. Yes. all of that and more. Thank you for that, Dr. White. We have some great questions that are coming in on both of the streams. But before we do that, I have to ask you, for those who are new to the show, I am a lover of grits and rap lyrics. And Dr. White, I know you're in the South, so first I have to ask, how do you like your grits?
Oh my gosh, creamy with cheese and lots of pepper. Creamy with cheese and lots of pepper. Yes.
That sounds good. That sounds really good right now. And I am a lover of rap lyrics. What is one of your favorite rap lyrics and why?
Okay, so I had to really think about this one in preparation for sharing with you today, and so, but I do have an answer, and I'm really loving my answer. Lecrae, Invisible. So specifically, here are the rap lyrics from Lecrae's Invisible song that I absolutely love. Lord, erase me if I ever turn and live for myself. Cause your glories infinitely greater than my personal health. And Lord, I know I'm not worthless. You give me my worth. But I know I'm not perfect to lolly the earth. And can't nobody do it like the way you do, using me and my whole crew to reach the world for you. And it's true, they watching everything that we do. Yeah, it's true that we're an illustration of you.
Oh, I love that. Tell me why you like that.
Well, because as I started to really think about, so to be fully transparent, I'm not really big on rap. There's certain rap that I can appreciate, and as a woman of faith, I do listen to Lecrae. I do like Lecrae, but words are important to me, and so I like words that really have strong meaning behind them. And as I think about my life and how I want to show up and the influence that I want to have, I can't do any of this work. This work is passion work for me, but I'm also just blessed to be in the space to where I can get paid for it, and I can also help benefit communities and organizations and people. And so, at the core of all of that, I just want to be a vessel where I am able to be an illustration of who I call my Redeemer. And so, that's why I think that really resonates with me.
I love it. Thank you for that.
Sure.
And the other question I have for you is, we have a lot of leaders that are watching, those with titles, those that might not have an official title yet. We're all leaders in our own right. What's something that you would give them as a tip on how to make the workplace better than we found it?
I love this question. And I'm going to answer it by really addressing the first half of your statement, which is about leadership. I think that sometimes when we think about leadership, we tend to narrow a definition as a position or title, but it's about influence. And so when we think about it in that regard as influence, we can lead and influence from any place within an organization or society in general. So what I want people to think about and really gravitate to help make the world better and society better in general is think about the importance of being an inclusion-minded leader, a person that sees it as their responsibility to help foster and create environments that are equitable, that have a strong sense of belonging so that everyone can show up at their best, and that are inclusive. And that does not require a title or a position, just requires us to care about humanity and seeing everyone show up at their best.
I love that. The capacity you want to activate. And so I appreciate you sharing that. This has been so good. I know we have quite a few questions. I'll try to get a couple because I know Dr. White has her life to live and work to do. Couple quick questions. Someone wants to know, what is an RFP?
Oh, request for a proposal. I'm so sorry. So sometimes it's request for information, RFI, but most often, especially when I talked about it as being really complicated process, that sometimes clients aren't quite as sensitive to try to narrow down. It's a request for a proposal. So usually it's asking for a good bit of information. Sometimes it's much more elaborate than others. And so the point that I was making is that if you're going to do an RFP, there's nothing wrong with that process in and of itself. There's a lot of value to it. Just don't overcomplicate it. Where you're asking for people to really do the work before getting paid to do the work.
Boom. Another good question with a similar ask is, do you think that for a DEI consultant role that certification is necessary?
That's a great question. I will say this, it can't hurt. I know of a ton of astute DEI practitioners who are not certified, but they have been able to grow their knowledge base in other ways. I would say that it is important for you to be intentional about growing your knowledge base. I'm finding that, especially with the current climate, there are a number of people that care about this work that are now, considering themselves experts and consultants. The potential downside of that is maybe not everyone has counted the cost of what that means exactly. And I think that can be to the detriment of the entire industry and space. So I would say that whatever your process is, just be intentional, whether it's going through a formal certification process or not, is, really up to each individual's interpretation, but just make sure that you are building up your knowledge base. And it's one thing to understand the work in theory, but you have to be able to also understand it in practice so that you can then, from a strategy perspective, help clients to navigate the complexity of the process so that they now are achieving outcomes that causes their spaces to be inclusive and, again, a high sense of belonging for all people. And so yeah.
Yeah,
benefited me. I think that it certainly gave me a good runway.
Yeah, I love that answer. And to your point, that's true. I mean, once the murder of George Floyd happened, I realized that so many people were now DEI consultants, or now their platform helps Black women do a certain thing. It's like, wait a second, you weren't doing that before.
Exactly. Now everybody is like racial equity kind of experts, right? Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I love the fact that there's been this huge, groundswell of interest into this space and this discipline. But, I also want to make sure that people are being careful to not unintentionally create a situation where people don't appreciate really the depth of the expertise that the discipline brings. I'm finding that there are many organizations that are also tapping people within their their organization that are either part of the LGBTQ community or maybe they're a person of color, and they're just, because of those dimensions of diversity, they're seeing them as now the experts of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think it's wrong on so many levels for so many reasons. But just know that there certainly are some skill sets that leads people to be able to do this work from a practitioner perspective in an effective way. So let's not lose sight of that.
Yes. Tools that we need in our toolkit to really be able to, if you're going to go down this path, that will definitely serve you. One last question that I see, I know so many great. Make sure that you follow Dr. White, and I'm sure she's written about a lot of some of this stuff already. But one great question that I see here is, it seems like you knew early about it seems like you knew early about how to be confident about growing into your role. How did that come naturally to you?
I think that knowledge and preparation, it just has this ability to build up your confidence. It's hard to go into a situation leading others into a space and knowledge base if you don't have it yourself. And so that's why, again, I continue to stress, if this is an area, whatever your consultancy area of interest may be, just really become a student of that. I immersed myself in it. It became so much a part of who I was, and I think that that's what's given me such a high level of confidence. And then surround yourself with people that really believe in being your hype men and women, when the time comes. I mean, I can't understate how important it is to have a tribe of people that's supporting you and your efforts. There were many times that I had mentors and sponsors and just, advocates who are introducing my name into conversations where I wasn't even in the room or at the table, if you will, but they helped me to secure a seat at the table by being those success partners, which I learned from you, Menda. Success partners are really key. And so I think that's where confidence certainly can be boosted. And but let me just say this too. I'm grateful that for the question, because it's just affirming what I think is so important for women in general, particularly women of color, is to show up with a high level of confidence, like you belong there. And I believe that to my core. So there are times where, yes, I may be shaking in my boots. Perhaps the imposter syndrome may come up, but I believe in my work and what I have to offer and my voice. And I don't let that cause me to shrink back. And so I also don't want people to presume that I don't have some of the challenges that a lot of women have in general, just about, again, being confident in who you are. But I think that if we, even if we're not feeling 100% confident, if we exude that, then others are going to see us and perceive us as confident. And that's important.
Yeah. It's been such a great conversation. Dr. White, where can people find you, hire you, support you, all the things?
Well, thank you for this question, and thank you for this platform, Minda. I don't take it lightly that you are such a success partner to so many people, not only with your resources that are just so rich and substantive, but just with the way in which you help people to show up at their best, such as today, giving me an opportunity to share with your audience. And so the best way is to visit my website, which is simply nikawhite.com. I produce a lot of resources that are available on my website as a courtesy to anyone that's looking to increase their leadership of inclusion, such as white papers, blog articles, short videos called Inclusion Uncomplicated, helping people to simplify DEI. And I think that's the best way. They can also connect from my website to all of the social media platforms that I'm on. And so I welcome any opportunity to extend my network to others, and look forward to learning from many of those who are in your audience who are participating today.
Yes, and I can't let you go without saying you host a show. Would you like to talk about that?
I would. Thank you. See, there you go again, success partners. So, and Linda knows this all too well because she was one of my guests actually a few months back. But so I do what's called inclusion. Intentional conversations. Again, I love that word intentional. So I have intentional conversations, which is a podcast. And for those of you who don't know what a podcast is, it's like a podcast, but they're video recordings with a live virtual audience as well. And it's all about intersecting diversity, equity, and inclusion with leadership in business. And so I have a co-host that come, and for an hour, we just talk about a variety of things, specifically highlighting some of the efforts that they are a part of. And just helping the community that is a part of intentional conversations to learn with and from each other about, again, these broad topics of diversity, equity, and inclusion, leadership, and business. So it takes place every Friday from 11 to 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. But then, so if you can't join live, we record every session. And so they're available on our website for replays. And so thank you for giving me a chance to share more about that, Minda.
Yeah, no, you're a great conversation. I had to let know where to find those, and I was surprised that nobody asked who you thought was going to win the Senate race.
Right. Absolutely. Well, and I have to say this before we end. I have to say this because we're getting down to the wire. Vote, everyone vote. Go out and vote. Cast your vote is so important. And not only just go and cast your vote, but see it fit to encourage someone else to vote. I have 2 college kids, and this week we all planned our vote, and we told our kids, my husband and I, you're coming home Friday night because we're going to be in line at 7 a.m. on Saturday morning, but you're going to vote. And so don't forget about the college kids that may not have moved their voting precinct, but if they're in driving distance, make sure they can get home. Do whatever you have to, but vote. It matters.
Yes, definitely. Be safe out there. I went to vote this weekend, and I'm so glad I did. There was this just sense of pride being able to cast my ballot for and see a Black woman's name there on the sheet. It just, I took everybody in that booth with me who fought on our behalf to have the right that we have that they didn't get to. And so we hold space for all of those people. And again, thank you so much for joining us for Secure the Seat. You could be anywhere doing anything and you were here with us. Make sure that you share this episode and make sure that you hire, follow, connect with Dr. White. We'll see you next Monday at noon.